Hello everyone, and welcome to the 50th Cocoa programming tutorial. In this tutorial, we're continuing where we left off in the previous tutorial on NSOutlineView. In the previous tutorial, we basically talked about how we set up our model for NSOutlineViews, so we kind of have this tree-like structure of person objects in our case. And then I showed you how you can display that model in the NSOutlineView by using its appropriate data source methods. So that was that tutorial. Very long-winded, apologize for that, but hopefully this one will be a little shorter. And yeah, this is the extension. So this is part 2 of NSOutlineViews, and in this tutorial I'll be talking about how we can edit, add, and remove values to our NSOutlineView, and hopefully that will sum up most of what everybody wanted to know about NSOutlineView. If there are still questions, feel free to leave what you still want to know or learn in the comments. But let's go ahead and get started. So in this tutorial, like I said, we're going to want to be able to add and remove values. So we'll say add. We're going to have some buttons for this, so we're just going to throw them in. So add and remove. And if we just go ahead and select the remove button, and under the attributes inspector, go to the key equivalent and just hit the delete key. And that just allows us to, when we're running this program, we can hit the delete key on our keyboard, and it'll just basically trigger this remove action. So whatever the remove button's action is, right, it's to remove an object, the delete key is equivalent to hitting the button. So that's just a nice, it's a pain in the butt to always hit the remove button if you're trying to just, remove objects. So having the delete key is nice. Alright, so before I dive into all the other stuff, I'm just going to talk about what we're going to accomplish with what we're doing. So let's just look at adding and removing values and basically how that's going to work. So if I have an object selected here and I go to add an object to it, basically what this means is that I'm going to add a child to this person. So if I said add on Stefan, he would be put where I am, right? It'll be put on where the Lucas people are. So if I hit add, we're adding somebody as a child to Stefan. Same if I add it to anybody else, right? If I go to add somebody to Taylor, she will now be have the children, so she'll actually have a nice little disclosure arrow next to her, and then there'll be some person underneath her. If I do not select anybody, then I can go ahead and hit add, and this will add it to the top level. So this will add it to the level that Yoda is on. It won't add it underneath Yoda, but it'll just add it to the top level of where our NSOutlineView is. If I hit remove, though, it does exactly what you expect it to do, right? If I hit remove, it's going to remove the specific object that I select. So it's pretty self-explanatory. If I remove one guy here, right, who actually has children underneath him, then if I hit remove on him, he's going to remove everybody that's underneath him as well. So if I hit delete on Stefan, he's going to kill me as well, basically. So if I hit delete on Yoda, everybody underneath Yoda goes away as well. So that's how the delete works as well. And editing values, you just go to click on somebody and you change the value to whatever you want. That's pretty self-explanatory as well, I guess. So that should just give you a nice outline of what we're doing and help you logically think through how this all works. Alright, so to be able to remove children, though, from person objects, we have to be able to have that functionality. So we're going to add a RemoveChild method into our interface here. And once we've declared it there, we're going to obviously implement it in our implementation. So we want to remove child. RemoveChild works basically the same way as addChild does, except it removes. So we say remove object, and we just pass in P, right? Remove object is just a method of NS mutable array, and then we can pass in whatever object we want to remove, and this will be whatever we select later in our NSOutlineView. So then this object P will be removed from our children array, which is what we want. Alright, so that's that. Okay, so that's all we had to do for person. We're gonna do a quick change over to our assistant editor here. and we're going to go to our main menu nib file. So what we want to do here is we want to add a few things to our outline view controller. So obviously we want to add the functionality of our add and remove. So we'll make an action, call it add, make another one, call it remove, and oops, I didn't want to make a property out of that, so we'll delete, try again, control drag, I want to make that an action, and I want to call this remove. There we go. Okay, so we've set up our add and remove actions. The last thing I need to get is a property or an IB outlet to our NSOutlineView. And the reason we need this is because, like I said earlier when we were adding and removing, we need to know what we've currently selected in our NSOutlineView. And how we can do that is if we have some kind of outlet to our NSOutlineView, right? We can ask the NSOutlineView, hey, what do you have selected right now? And that'll allow us to figure out where we add and remove objects. So to add a property for this, we can select and select again. That will select our NSOutlineView that is inside the NSScrollView. So we'll just call this outline view, and there we go. So now we have a nice IB outlet for that, and we should be good to go to work. So we'll go back to our standard view, switch over to outline view controller .m, and here we go. So this is essentially the same code. I made a few little tweaks just to use subscripting notation. Somebody just mentioned that in the last tutorial, which is a good thing to notice. So it's a little cleaner, I guess, now. And but let's just get coding what we want here. So we have our add and remove methods, which we'll get to in a bit. The first thing, though, that I'm going to get to is actually editing the values. So how do we do that? Well, basically, it works the same way as all the other data source methods do. So what happens is the NSOutlineView, if we go to change some value in it, right, we type something in and it'll send us that change via some kind of data source method. So we'll go into a little more depth in that in just a second, but the method I want is this outline view set object value for table column by item. So it's very similar to this one, the one right above it, right? This method gets the specific values off of our person object. This one is just going to change the values on the person object. So I'm sure the method name is pretty self-explanatory. But let's take a little look at what some of these parameters are for this method. So basically, let's look at the set object value. This object that's passed to us is the change value that we get back. So for example, if I wanted to change Taylor's age to be 56, and once I hit return, what I'm going to get is the NSOutlineView is going to call this data source method, and it's going to pass me this changed object value. So I'm going to get back an NS number in this case of 56. So if I look at that, right, I have my NS number value of 56, and then I can look at the person object and change that value on them, right? So basically what this method is really getting us to do is we're making some kind of change in our UI. So in this case, we're making a change to our age. But my job in this method is to change the actual person object, right, our model objects, so that it reflects the change that I make to the user interface. So I actually have to change the person object to reflect the change I make here. So that's why we are past the object. We want to know what the change is. And then the other important one is by item, or this item parameter. The item parameter represents the person object of that change. So in this case, I have Taylor selected right now, so I would get back the person object that represents or that holds, right, Taylor and 56. So or Taylor and her previous value technically, right? It'd be whatever person object is represented by this row. So that's what this item value is. So like I said, my job here in this method is to put the object change value. So I need to take the object, whatever this new change is, and I need to set it in our item or our person object. So that's that. So how do we do this? Well, it's very similar to what we do to actually get the values. We just switch it around and we want to change the values now. So if there we go, if our table column identifier is equal to string name, then what I want to do, right, is I want to change our item to be that specific object value. So I can just say item set name, and I'm going to change it to object, right? Because that'll be the NSString value that is passed to us from the NSOutlineView. This is just giving me a complaint because it's saying that there's actually multiple set name methods, and it needs to know which one it is. So I can fix this just by typecasting this. I basically just tell it use the set name of the person object. All right. So that's that. So what this will do is I make some change in my user interface on somebody's name. The object value, whatever the name that I changed. So if I changed Taylor to be Bob, for example, then this object value would be Bob, and I am now setting the name on my person value to be Bob. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And like I said, that item value is that specific person that I'm changing the value on. All right, so the next part is another if statement just for the age. So I want to check the identifier for the specific table column. If I'm in the column that is the age column, then I want to change the age. So I can say item set age, and there isn't multiple set age methods, so I don't actually have to typecast it in this case, but I just want to be able to set the age. So how do I do this? Well, since I'm getting back an object value, right, and this will be, in this case, an NS number. It's going to be the number value that I get back from my age. And so set age, though, takes an int, right? So what I have to do is actually change this back so that my NS number is an int value. So this is pretty non-trivial. All I need to do is go to object, and then I ask for its int value, like so. And that's that. So that's all I need to do to get the item to set its age. I just take, if it's an NS number value, I ask for its int value, and that will get me the integer value, and then I set that on my person. So that's that. And we can even check this to make sure that this is working, and it should reflect. So if I change Taylor to Bob, like I said, there we go, and I can change the age, and it works. So that's what we expected. Okay, so now that we have that working, which is good, let's try to implement our add and remove. So how does add work? Well, like I said in the beginning of the tutorial, if I'm on some person, right, Stefan, and I go to add somebody to Stefan, what I'm doing is essentially adding somebody underneath Stefan. So I'm going to add, if I hit add right now, I would add another person, another child, essentially, of Stefan. So how do I basically go about doing this then? Well, I want to figure out where Stefan is located, right? If I've selected Stefan, I want to get the person object represented by this selection, right? So how I can do this is I can ask the NSOutlineView what person is represented on this row. And so there's a method for that, and we'll get the item on this row. So that gets back the specific person on this row, which will be Stefan. So from there, I can just simply add to Stefan a new object, right? I have the reference to the person object, Stefan, and then I can just say add child, and then I'll add a new object. So it's, this one's quite easy. So all I have to do, like I said, is I want to get some person from my NSOutlineView, so I can say self.outlineView, and I want to get the item at row. And so item at row will return the object located at a specific row. And to figure out what row I currently have, I want to say self.outlineView selected row. like that. And that will get me the object at whatever row I've selected. Alright, so now I can check, there's going to be two possible things that happen. So either I actually am selected, right? If I, let's just go back to our actual application here. If I've selected an object, right, and I call this add method, it'll get me the person that I've selected. However, if I don't have anybody selected, right, then I want to add objects to the top level, or basically where Yoda is located, right? I'll add new objects underneath here. And so what this means is that I don't have anybody selected, and this method will return nil. Basically, right, item at row, I didn't have anybody selected, so it's just going to return nil. So those are the two conditions. Either the person exists or the person doesn't exist. If the person exists, I add it underneath that person. If the person doesn't exist, right, if nothing is selected on my NSOutlineView, I just want to add it to the top level. So how do we do that? Well, if the P exists, then we will simply add to P. So we'll say P add child, and we'll make a new person. So person alloc init. And since I don't know, if I had text fields or something, I could fill out that information, but I don't know any of that information, so I'm just going to do person alloc init, and we set that method up in our person object. Okay, so the other case, of course, is if this doesn't happen, right? So we'll say else. I'm just going to get rid of these brackets. So else, what we're going to do is, if you remember, we have our, just looking at this, we have our NS mutable array of people right in our outline view controller. So the outline view controller has this array of people, and what we did originally was we added the top level person Yoda to the array. So if nothing is selected, this is what I want to do again. I want to add a new person to this NS mutable array of people that I have in our outline view controller. So to do that, I can just say self dot people, and I will just add some object. So I'll say add object, and we'll just add new person, like so. And there we go. So that should be everything I need to do for getting that to work. Now, the last part, which is also very important, is the refreshing of the table view. So if I was to do this right now, if I run this again, you'll see that if I select somebody here and hit add, I'm actually adding objects right now, but we don't see them. And what's the reason for this? Well, we didn't reload our table view. So our table view wasn't notified that any changes were made, so it didn't know to refresh what it had. So this is a very easy fix. We just say self.outlineView reload data. There we go. And that should be that. So if we go ahead and run this, we should be able to go underneath somebody. So if I go to Stefan here and hit add, we get some new test name with a value of 0. That's what we get from our person alloc init. If I'm under some person that doesn't have anybody and I hit add, now they have a new disclosure arrow and they have a person underneath them. If I don't have anybody selected and I hit add, we've added a new test name to the top level, right? So it's on the same level as Yoda. We have a new bunch of test names, and I should be able to change these names as well and their values. So there we go. All right, so the last step is to get the remove method working, which is admittedly a little more complicated, but it's still quite doable. You just kind of have to think about how this works. So let's just kind of run our application again, because I think it's easy to help when you're trying to visualize this. So if I, who can I look at here? Let's just look at Stefan. And if I was to remove Stefan, right, I hit remove, what does this mean? Well, it means that I have to remove that specific object, right? But how do I actually remove him, right? Because what's really going on, right, is that Yoda is the guy that actually has Stefan contained in his array, right? When we originally set this application up, we have Yoda as our boss, but then we add a bunch of children to Yoda. So Stefan is contained within Yoda. So if I just have Stefan selected and I hit delete, I have to figure out how to remove him from Yoda. So the way I do this is I ask for the parent object of the specific person. So Stefan's parent object is Yoda. Once I can get Yoda's reference, so once I get a reference to our parent, which is Yoda, then I can ask Yoda to remove the person I originally selected, right? So it's a little more complicated for the remove, but it's not that bad. We just have to figure out, so we select somebody, then the only way to remove them is to remove them from the parent object. So we ask the TableView for the parent of this person. So we say Stefan, we say TableView, get us the parent object. Parent object is Yoda. Then we'll say, okay, parent object, please remove this child, Stefan, right? That's what we have to do. Now, the other case though, well, there's a few cases. So if, for example, I selected Yoda, right? Yoda doesn't have any parent object. So his parent object will be nil, which means that actually we want to remove him from the NSMutable array because, right, he's in our outline view's NSMutable array. He doesn't have any parent objects, so his parent object will be nil. And when we realize that, we can then actually just say, okay, NSOutlineView, people, the people NSMutable array, we want to remove the object Yoda. And there might be one more case in there that I'm forgetting, but anyway, well, I'll talk about that, I guess, if I think maybe those are the only two cases, but well, I guess we'll think about that. Okay, so let's go back to our remove method here. So we need to do two things. We need to get the person that we've selected, so P, and this works the same way as what we did right here. So I'm just going to copy some code like that, and that will get our selected person. And now we want to get the parent. So we'll say person parent. And how do we do this? Well, we just ask the outline view for the parent object. So in NSOutlineView, there is a method called parent for item, very convenient. And then we just pass the item, which is the person, right? So we say P, like that. All right, so now that's that. So let's just start off with the one case. So if the parent exists, right, we selected somebody. So obviously we had somebody selected in our NSTableView. Obviously, if there's somebody selected, P is not going to be nil, right? P exists. There is a person selected. Then we want to say, okay, let's see if the parent exists, right? If the parent exists, then we will just ask the parent to remove that child. So we'll say parent remove child P, and that's that. That's all we have to do. Now the other case though, so we'll say else if, and I'll just do that. So the other condition though is that P, we have to check that actually P exists, right? If P doesn't exist, if P is the only thing that exists but the parent didn't, right? So if I say else if P, so basically if this if statement fails, right, that means that there was no parent object. So after that, we're going to say, okay, there was no parent object, which means that you have to be a top level object. So going back to our example, right, this would be the case of Yoda. So if we have Yoda right here selected, right, and I call this method, I get the person object selected this row, P exists, right? Then I call this method parent for item at Yoda, but there is no parent item, so parent item will now be nil. If parent item is nil, that means that this if statement fails, right? Then we go on to the else if. If the P exists, right, we actually have somebody selected, but there's no parent, that means that they're a top level object. That means that they are, like I said, they're on the top. They're basically in our people array, right, in our NSOutlineView. So what we want to do is just say self.people remove object, and we'll remove object, which one do we want to remove? P, right? Remove the one that we selected. Simple enough. And that is everything, I believe. So there's only those two cases. Basically, the parent object exists that you selected, or it doesn't, and then you figure out for those two cases what you're going to do. Of course, if nobody's selected, right, You might be thinking that if nobody's selected and I hit remove, nothing's still going to be done. And we could probably come up with a better way of doing this, but really, I think this is where Objective-C is kind of nice. So we ask the outline view for an item. If nobody's selected, P is nil, right? If nobody's selected here, parent is nil. And so, we check for P, if we check for parent, we check for P, neither of them exists, then we don't do anything, right? And that's that. So we could probably check for this, earlier on, and then, not do anything else in this method, but I don't think it's really a big deal. The last thing that we have to do, though, is, of course, reload our table or our outline view. So we'll say self outline view, reload data, and that will just notify our outline view that there was something changed, so you should refresh what you are now showing. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have. So if I go to Stefan right here as a good example, if I hit delete on him, then he exists, right? His parent object is Yoda, so he exists. So if the parent existed, then we'll just remove child P. And the else if, right? That's the whole point of using an else if, is that this thing won't be executed. So we'll skip the else if, right? Because this if statement was used and we removed Stefan. And then we just reload our table view. So if I hit remove or delete key, then Stefan and me die and we go off into the abyss. If I do this on anybody else, right, they get deleted just as you'd expect. And the last example, or before I do that, I'll just try hitting delete, right? And delete on nothing does nothing. And lastly, if I hit delete on Yoda, then he goes away and nobody else is there. So that's that. And that should be a fully functioning table view, I guess you would say. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have any other questions about anything that you saw in this, then feel free to ask them in the comments below. Just a brief overview again of what we did. We had this data source method here. I'm just going to make a nice little progma mark. Maybe actions. If we are trying to edit some value in the table view, this is done through the data source method. This one right here. It tells us the object that changed, or the changed value, and then we get back we also get the person object that is currently being changed. So our job is to simply take the changed value and set it on our person, and then that's that. So that's when you want to edit values. When you want to add or remove people, you have to figure out where they're located in your NSOutlineView. Then from there, you just kind of think about what you have to do to actually remove that person, right? Add is pretty simple. If you have somebody selected, you add them to that person. And if nobody's selected, you add them to the top level, right? And then we reload. And remove, again, is a little more complicated. We have to figure out if the parent exists, but still, it's relatively simple. If they have a parent, we just ask the parent to remove the person we have selected. And if there is no parent, though, right, if this if statement fails, then we go into this else if. So we had no parent, then what we do is that means that the person is a top level object like our Yoda object was. We remove them from the people array because that's where they are located, and then we just reload the data. So that sums it up. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. More tutorials are on the way. I'm trying to keep now a weekly schedule, so that's just a heads up. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the tutorial, and I'll see you in the next Cocoa programming tutorial. See you then.